3 Rangers players. One after another. Going after Shohei Ohtani in a way that silenced an entire stadium mid-celebration. In a way that turned the greatest individual moment of that baseball week into something darker, more dangerous, and more revealing about the pressure that surrounds this sport's most extraordinary figure. All 3 were ejected immediately. No warnings. No second chances. No room for interpretation. But ejections don't undo what happened. They don't erase the image of 3 professional athletes making the decision, in that specific moment, right after that specific record, to go after the one man that every team in baseball has spent years trying to stop through legitimate competition and repeatedly failed. Today we are going inside every second of what happened. We are going inside the record that triggered it. We are going inside the Rangers' dugout and the decision-making that led 3 players to cross a line that changed the entire conversation around this game. And we are going inside what this moment reveals about the impossible position Shohei Ohtani occupies at the very top of professional baseball. This is the full story. And it is one you will not forget. To understand what happened, you have to understand what Ohtani had just done. Because records in baseball are not created equal. Some records arrive quietly. A number turns over on a statistical ledger somewhere and analysts notice and journalists write about it and it becomes a footnote in a career that eventually gets discussed at Hall of Fame time. And then there are the other kind of records. The kind that arrive with weight. With consequence. With the unmistakable feeling that something has just shifted permanently in the landscape of the sport. What Ohtani achieved in the moments before those 3 Rangers players made their decision was the second kind. Completely and undeniably the second kind. This was not a number that arrived because of a gentle accumulation of ordinary performances. This was a number that arrived because night after night, at-bat after at-bat, situation after situation, Ohtani had done something that the best pitchers in the world, the most sophisticated defensive alignments, the most carefully constructed game plans had all tried and failed to prevent. He had simply been too good for too long for anyone to stop. And that, precisely that, is what makes what the Rangers players did so psychologically revealing. Because when you cannot stop someone through skill and preparation and legitimate competition, something else can happen inside a dugout. Something that has nothing to do with baseball and everything to do with human nature pushed to a breaking point. Frustration becomes resentment. Resentment becomes anger. And anger, in a charged athletic environment where physical contact is already part of the fabric of competition, can tip into something that should never happen. It tipped that day. The celebration was still happening when the first Rangers player moved. That detail matters. This was not a delayed reaction. This was not something that built slowly over the next half inning while emotions settled and then suddenly erupted. This happened while the record was still being acknowledged. While Ohtani's teammates were still reacting. While the crowd was still producing the kind of noise that fills a stadium when something genuinely historic has just occurred. The first player came with intention. Anyone watching could see that immediately. There is a difference between the accidental contact that happens in baseball, the close pitch, the collision at a base, the scramble for a loose ball, and deliberate, directed aggression aimed at a specific person. This was the second kind. The targeting of Ohtani was unmistakable. In a moment designed for celebration, in a context where everyone else on that field was responding to the magnitude of the achievement, this player made a choice to respond differently. To respond physically. To direct aggression at the man who had just made history. The umpires reacted immediately. That speed of response tells its own story. When officials who spend entire careers making split-second decisions and then deliberating carefully before delivering consequences react without hesitation, it means what they witnessed was unambiguous. There was no gray area to navigate. No competing interpretations to weigh against each other. What happened was clear enough that the decision was instantaneous. Ejection. Immediate. No discussion. But it wasn't over. Here is the part that transforms this from an incident into a moment that demands serious examination. The first ejection happened. Everyone on that field saw it. Everyone in that dugout saw it. The consequence was clear, public, and immediate. And then the second Rangers player moved toward Ohtani anyway. Think about what that decision requires. In the seconds after watching a teammate get ejected, removed from the game permanently, facing the certainty of suspension and fine and the kind of league scrutiny that follows these moments, a second player looked at that consequence and decided it was worth it. Worth it to go after Ohtani. Worth it to add their name to what was already becoming an ugly chapter in what should have been a historic day. Worth it to make a statement that no statistical record and no umpire's decision could apparently contain. The second ejection came as fast as the first. And then, and this is the moment that the entire baseball world stopped and stared, the third player moved. Two teammates already ejected. The message from the officials already delivered twice with complete clarity. The entire stadium watching. The television cameras capturing every second. The certain knowledge that this would be replayed and analyzed and discussed and condemned across every platform where baseball exists. The third Rangers player moved toward Ohtani anyway. 3 ejections in the immediate aftermath of one record. 3 players making the same decision within minutes of each other, each one fully aware of what had just happened to the player before them, each one choosing to proceed regardless. That sequence is not just a discipline problem. That is not just a conversation about the rules of professional baseball and the consequences for violating them. That sequence is a statement. Whether intentional or born from raw, uncontained emotion, it is a statement about the level of tension that has built around Shohei Ohtani's dominance, and about what happens when that tension finally finds a breaking point. Now we need to ask the question that matters most in the aftermath of those 3 ejections. How does something like this happen? Professional baseball players are not amateurs. They are not young men playing in a local league where emotions run unchecked and consequences are minimal. They are highly trained, highly compensated, highly scrutinized professionals who understand better than almost anyone what the rules are, what the consequences for breaking them look like, and what the entire world of cameras and media and league officials watching means for anything they do on a field. And yet 3 of them, one after another, made the same decision in the same moment. To understand that, you have to understand what losing to Ohtani repeatedly actually feels like from inside an opposing dugout. Because there is a specific and particular frustration that builds when you face someone who is operating at a level that your best preparation cannot match. You study the film. You identify the tendencies. You build a game plan around the data. You bring in specialists. You work through scenarios in practice. You do everything that professional preparation demands, and then he steps into the batter's box and does something that none of the film study or the data or the preparation had fully accounted for. And then he does it again. And again. And again. 44 consecutive plate appearances reaching base does not happen against teams that are not trying to stop it. It happens against teams that are desperately, exhaustively, professionally trying everything they know to stop it, and failing every single time. That kind of repeated failure accumulates inside a dugout in ways that are not always visible from the outside. It creates an atmosphere where the normal emotional controls that professionals maintain can, under the right circumstances, in the right charged moment, simply give way. The right moment arrived when Ohtani's record was confirmed. And the atmosphere inside the Rangers' dugout that had been building over weeks and months of failed attempts to contain him, it gave way completely. 3 times. And through all of it, there was Ohtani. This is the part of the story that never gets old no matter how many times you witness it in different forms and different contexts. Because the chaos that surrounds this man, the records, and the controversy and the fury and the ejections and the impossible scrutiny, never seems to reach him the way it reaches everyone else. It is not that he is unaware. Nobody who plays at this level is unaware of what is happening around them. His baseball intelligence is too complete, his attention to his environment too precise, for the events of that inning to have escaped his notice or his understanding. But there is a difference between awareness and reaction. And Ohtani, more consistently than any athlete in recent memory, demonstrates the difference between those two things in situations that would overwhelm most people. He was aware of what those three Rangers players did. Of course he was. Everyone on that field was aware. The crowd was aware. The officials were aware. The television cameras were aware. What Ohtani did not do was allow their decision to become his crisis. He did not escalate. He did not retaliate. He did not use the moment, a moment where public sympathy was entirely on his side, where the moral clarity of the situation was absolute, to make it about himself in any way that went beyond what the moment required. He stood in the middle of extraordinary provocation and remained, with almost frustrating completeness, himself. That quality, that unshakable consistency of character under circumstances designed to shake it, is perhaps the most remarkable thing about him. More remarkable, in its own way, than any number in any statistical record. Records can be approached. Other players can close the gap between their numbers and his numbers, even if closing it completely feels impossible from where things stand today. But the composure Ohtani demonstrates in moments like this, the absolute refusal to be defined by the chaos that surrounds him rather than by the work he does and the person he is, that is not something that can be approached by chasing it. It can only be built, slowly and deliberately, from the inside. 3 ejections of this nature do not end with the final out of a baseball game. They begin a process. A formal, documented, league-level process that carries its own timeline and its own consequences well beyond what happened on that field. Suspensions were coming. That much was certain before the stadium had emptied. The nature of what occurred, the deliberate targeting of a player in the immediate aftermath of a historic achievement, the repetition of that targeting across 3 separate individuals despite clear and immediate consequences, left no room for the kind of ambiguity that sometimes allows disciplinary outcomes to be softer than the moment deserved. The league had to respond with force. Not just for Ohtani's protection, though that mattered. But for the integrity of the sport itself. For the message that professional baseball sends to everyone watching, players, coaches, young athletes in living rooms around the country and around the world, about what is and is not acceptable inside the lines. When 3 players target one man in the immediate aftermath of a record, the sport is watching to see what happens next. And the response from leadership in those situations either reinforces the standards the game claims to hold or reveals that those standards are negotiable. The ejections were only the beginning. The real reckoning was still coming. 3 Rangers players. 3 ejections. One record that apparently pushed people past the breaking point of what competitive frustration can contain. This was not baseball at its best. Nobody watching those 3 players move toward Ohtani one after another, each one undeterred by the immediate consequence that had just fallen on the player before them, was watching the sport they love at its finest moment. But in a strange and uncomfortable way, what happened that day revealed something true. Something that all the careful media management and all the choreographed celebrations and all the highlight packages cannot show you. It revealed the size of what Ohtani has built. You do not inspire that level of reaction from that many people in that charged a moment by being ordinary. You do not trigger 3 ejections in the immediate aftermath of a record by being someone that opponents have found a way to make peace with. You trigger that by being genuinely, historically, impossibly difficult to stop. The Rangers tried everything legitimate competition offers. For 44 consecutive plate appearances and beyond, it was not enough. And when legitimate competition was exhausted, 3 players chose something else entirely. They paid for that choice immediately. And Shohei Ohtani went back to work. Just as he always does. Because that is what genuinely unstoppable looks like. Not just in what it achieves, but in how it responds when the world around it completely loses its composure.